Good afternoon to one and all. Today I'm going to present on the topic modernization theory. So here are the things I'll be talking about today. First is introduction. Second, I'll be moving on to emergence. Third is history. Then different aspects of modernization, features and criticisms. First of all, I'll be explaining the term modernization by reading Chris Baker's definition. Chris Baker defines modernization as modernization typically refers to a post-traditional, post-medieval historical period, one marked by the move from feudalism or agrarianism towards capitalism, industrialization, secularization, rationalization, the nation state, and its constituent institutions. Modernization theory emerged in the 1950s as an explanation of how the industrial societies of North America and Western Europe developed. In simple terms, modernization in sociology refers to the transformation from a traditional rural agrarian society to a secular urban society. Modern society is an industrial society. To modernize a society, first of all, to industrialize it, historically, the rise of modern society has been inextricably linked with the emergence of industrial society. Next, I'll be talking about the emergence of the term modernization. So, modernization theory emerged in the 1950s as an explanation of how the industrial societies of North America and Western Europe developed. The theory argues that society developed in fairly predictable stages through which they became increasingly complex. Development depends primarily on the importation of technology as well as a number of other political and social changes believed to come about as a result. Here we can also see how modernization theory goes hand in hand with dependency theory. Modernization theory emerged in the wake of World War II as a development theory. Western countries believed this model would not only be the solution for the European economy, but also to bring developing countries to a Western standard. Related to this, many economists, socialists, and philosophers work about how the modernization theory works in several countries, especially in developing countries, and what to extent developed countries intervene in policy decision making. Social scientists, primarily of white formulated modernization theory during the mid 20th century. Reflecting on a few hundred years of history in North America and Western Europe, and taking a positive view of the change observed during that time, they developed a theory that explains that modernization is a process that involves industrialization, urbanization, rationalization, bureaucracy, mass consumption, the adoption of democracy. During this process, pre-modern or traditional societies evolved into the contemporary Western societies that we know today. Modernization theory holds that process involves increased availability and levels of formal schooling and the development of mass media, both of which are thought to foster democratic political institutions. Through this through the process of modernization, transportation and communication became increasingly sophisticated and accessible. Populations became more urban and mobile, and the extended family declined in importance. Simultaneously, the importance of the individual in economic and social life increases and intensifies. Next, I'll be talking about characteristics. Here I've divided into six different characteristics, and they are intellectual characteristics are like emphasis on science and technology, reason and rationality, belief in progress and human development, control over environment, and avoidance of superstition and orthodoxy. Second, political characteristics include marginalization of religious influence from state political matters and rise of secular democratic polity, universal adult suffrage, democratic values. Third, religious characteristics constitute a secularized society free from religious orthodoxy and decline of religiosity. Fourth, social characteristics include decline of traditional social order, decline of joint family system, alienated kinship ties. Fifth, in relation of education, it involves literacy, emphasis on knowledge, trained skill, and the like. Sixth, economic characteristics include changing over to commercial agriculture, use of machines and advanced technology in agriculture, growing industrialization and urbanization, improve, improvement in commerce, industry, and growth of market, etc. Thus, modernity implies a bunch of new socio-economic, politico-religious, and intellectual system totally separated from the traditional one. If we are to speak broadly, modernization has following salient features. They are number one, scientific tempo outlook. Second is reasoning and rationalism. Third is secularization. Fourth is high aspirations. Fifth, total change in attitude, norms, and values. Sixth is developed economy. Seventh, broader national interest. Eighth is democratization. Ninth, an open society. And tenth is a challenging personality. And finally, dynamic leadership to organize socio-economic, cultural, and political movement and undertake reforms. We can have a look at these salient features. Now we will be talking about some criticisms. Many scholars, often those from Western nations, pointed out over the years that modernization theory fails to account for the way Western reliance on colonization, the stolen labor of enslaved people, and theft of land and resources provided the wealth and material resources necessary for the pace and scale of development in the West. So what they criticize is that it cannot be replicated in other places because of this, and it should not be replicated in this way. These critics agree. Others, such as critical theorists, including members of the Frankfurt School, have pointed out that Western modernization is premised on the extreme exploitation of workers within the capitalist system, and that the toll of modernization on social relations has been great, leading to widespread social alienation, a loss of community, and unhappiness. Still, others critique modernization theory for failing to account for the unsustainable nature of the project in an environmental sense, and point out that pre-modern, traditional, and indigenous cultures typically had much more environmentally conscious and symbiotic relationships between people and the planet. Some point out that elements and values of traditional life need not to be completely erased in order to achieve a modern society, pointing to Japan as an example. So, coming to the conclusion, what I believe is that those who support modernization theory agree that most developing countries have at least improved due to their contact with Western capitalist states, and there is no formal basis for the critique of modernization theory as a development paradigm.